Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Product Bulb podcast, episode one. I am super excited for today's episode. The focus for today's episode is pricing strategies for AI products, and we have an expert on pricing strategies here, Shah Choudhury. Welcome to the podcast. He is the senior manager of pricing strategies at Salesforce. He has a 10 plus years of experience in in the space as an engineer, as a consultant, and now as a senior manager of pricing strategies at Salesforce. So Shah, welcome to the episode. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, Hardy. Really excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Definitely, yeah, our pleasure. Can you just share a bit about your background and experience in this domain before we get started?
Of course, I'll try to be brief. As Harini mentioned, I'm a senior manager for pricing strategy at Salesforce. I oversee the monetization strategy for our commerce cloud portfolio, so the e-commerce engine we have, which competes with Shopify. Previously, I was working in other cloud families like Marketing Cloud and Data Cloud. So I've been at Salesforce for 2 years, working primarily on SaaS pricing strategies, and now the whole of the day is spent on AI and Einstein pricing, which is you see a lot of news about that. And then before Salesforce, I worked at Simon Kucher. It's known as the world's leading pricing strategy consulting firm. There, I primarily focused on technology. So I did a lot of projects with, let's say, Series A, B, C, kind of like startups and also big tech. And then I also, interestingly, did a lot of projects on the restaurants end. So I did a lot of pricing for fries, milkshakes, and kind of burgers as well. So you'll see there's a lot of similarities in pricing strategy when you take both into account, but it's fun.
That is a varied domain experience. I think we are like super lucky to have you go through the weeds of AI pricing strategy. So before getting into that, could you give us the listeners just a foundation on what are the different monetization models for like SaaS products?
So when we think about so first of all, monetization model wise, there's different things, right? So you think like when you think about SaaS, the most popular thing was subscription based pricing, which kind of like has have been going on for a while. And then maybe in the last year or two, consumption based pricing has become more popular with the snowflakes of the world and cost based kind of like infrastructure needs and everything. So, and now we're going into the domain of AI and thinking about more innovative pricing solutions. So, those are like the monetization primary models. But if we think about like how we think about pricing strategy in this domain of like tech or SaaS or AI, it basically consists of three things. One is packaging, right? So how you're going to sell your solution, right? How you design that, that's very critical. The second part is price model. So how you are charging your customers. So it's not about how much you charge them, it's how you charge them is more important, because in software there's the scalability element, there's predictability, you want to understand the different metrics and how you're gaining value and how you're paying for that. And then the third element, which is obviously important, which is the list price, right? So how much you're going to charge for this particular feature, solution, or the job to be done. So if you take those three into combine, the packaging, that's always comes first, that how we're going to design this solution, how we're going to go to market and target different segments. And then the second part is, okay, how are we going to charge for this? It can be per user, it can be based on the gross merchandise value and other elements. So what's how we're going to charge our customer, what is the value metric going to be? And then the third is, okay, our competition charges $10, they provide value of 10, we provide a value of 12, so we should charge $12. So just understanding that element of how you kind of like come up with the list price. So with all these three together, I would say that's like the pricing strategy for tech solutions or SaaS or even AI.
Interesting. Well, thank you for giving us like the basics of it. I think when you're talking about AI product management or AI product strategy, pricing strategy I think is plays a really important role and probably is not talked about as often as it should, like in the newsletters or in the blog articles, because that is pretty much going to be the end result, like what you want to what should be the revenue and how you're going to generate revenue from your product. So Going into the specifics of AI product, like how do you approach understanding the intricacies and unique value proposition of an applied AI product before, diving into the pricing strategy? Like,
No, very, very good question. And I would say that is the most critical part, right? Understanding the jobs to be done, the value you're providing to your customer, and then that based on that, you kind of go into the okay, how are we going to monetize this? So, first of all, we work with product managers very closely. So, the product managers obviously have more knowledge and more understanding of their customer base and also of their product. So, they explain to us that, okay, these are the jobs to be done. This is the value the product is bringing to the customer. This is the incremental value. And you kind of like get that understanding from there. And then the second part is okay, what we heard from the product is always internal. And then product managers are also very much in love with their product sometimes, right? So it's like the clear vision is there. So you do the market research, right? You try to understand the voice of the customer, and different ways to understand value is you can put something in front of them, right? Hey, you're using this solution today, which is your main solution. Let's say this is priced at $100. This is a new feature or a new product that is coming to the market. These are the jobs to be done. This is how it's going to benefit you. If this is 100, how much are you willing to pay for this particular new product? And then you kind of like understand, okay, someone would say 10, 20, 30, and that's kind of like gives you an understanding of the value they see there. But another thing which is very important in pricing strategy is context. So when you are talking to customers, you need to understand who this customer is, right? It can be an enterprise customer, it can be a commercial or a small medium business, right? So the value differs based on the different segments. And also you have to understand even more deeply that, okay, maturity, like is this customer technically more mature than the others? So those intricacies are very kind of like critical when you're kind of crafting your strategy. So understanding value, I would say you take your different customer segments, you talk to them, and then you try to validate the value from the perspective of the product manager. And then when you have a consistent kind of like understanding, that's when you go into like, okay, let's craft the pricing strategy, the monetization, how we're going to charge and everything afterward. But in many times, I mean, we have products where yes, we see a lot of value, but the customer doesn't see it. And then it's kind of like, okay, this is something we don't necessarily need to even launch, right? If you're not going to make money, why even launch it?
absolutely, that's the question every AI team, I think, is answering today. You touched upon a really important point, the market research. Like how, like if you can go over, like just the steps that you take, for market research before getting into the pricing strategy, and this is specifically for the applied AI products. Like you have all these the OpenAI's ChatGPT and like Google's Gemini now. So you have all these foundation models, and there are like startups and all the other companies who are trying to build products on top of it to build their downstream products. So how do we approach the market research, and how would that influence the pricing strategy?
Very good question. And as a pricing strategist, we love market research. It's kind of like when we talk about pricing strategy, it's a mix of art and science. So this is the scientific part where we are getting data and we're able to analyze and everything. So stepwise, I think the first step is understanding the markets you're going to target, right? So what segment of the market? If you are going to target all of the market, enterprise, commercial, small, medium businesses, okay, let's make sure we get samples, right? Like we hear from each of those segments. If we're going to target only enterprises, okay, let's make sure we talk to only enterprise customers and hear from them. So that's like the first thing, getting the sample right. This a lot of work goes into kind of like designing, okay, the sample sizes we need, the quality of the sample. So because you don't want garbage in, garbage out, right? So like making sure that you're getting the right insight is the first step. And a lot of firms help in that kind of like gathering samples and getting people to take surveys and talk to. So that's one. The second step is okay, designing like a market research, the survey, right? So we touched about like packaging. That's one. Price metrics or price model, and then the pricing itself. So when you're designing your market research, you want to understand or get insights in all three of those categories. There's different ways you can do it. So first of all, if you think about packaging, what is packaging basically? It's basically let's go in a simple one. Good, better, best. This is one of the ones in SaaS, which is very common. You'll see it in every website. Like you have an entry level product, then you have something which serves most of the customer base, right? The middle product, which is the better. And then you have like the premium best, which is for, again, people who have high willingness to pay and high needs as well. So when you're designing a good, better, best, what is the things you need to understand? You need to understand that what is the need, feature needs or needs from different segments, so you can design that good, better, best. So people who are enterprises, they want a lot of out of the box features, right? They want a lot more flexibility, and they also have a higher willingness to pay. So basically, when you're designing your best, that is targeting those enterprise customers. But how do you understand that? So let's say I'm a company with 20 features, right? And I want to design a good, better, best. One question I can ask in a survey is, hey, here's the 20 features. What are the must-haves for you? Like you must need it to use this software. What are the nice-to-haves, and what are the things that are not needed? So basically, when you do that and you run the market research, you will see with more data coming in that enterprise customers, they have maybe the must-haves are like 12 features. You'll see people who are commercial, their must-haves are like 7 or 8 features. And then if you go down market, small, medium businesses, maybe their must-have features are 3 to 5, right? You will see that kind of like play out, and that will let you design, right, that particular good, better, best itself. So that's one way. Another way is, here's 20 features. You can build your own solution, but I'm giving you 100 points. And these are like the different points associated. So you, again, make people to combine and build it. So these are ways you kind of like define the packaging structure and the construct itself. So you have the right segments, you're asking the right questions about your feature, and then you're able to derive them. So that's packaging. And this is what we're targeting when we're doing the market research. So now if you talk about price model, right? So first thing is, how are you going to charge your customers? Is it going to be subscription? Is it going to be consumption? Or today's in world, it's hybrid, right? Like you have a subscription part, and then based on usage, right, you have like the consumption part. So you try to understand what are customers willing, like what is more resonating with your customer base. And then the second thing you want to understand is, what is the right price metric, right? So then the right price metric is always about, is it simple, right? So your customer understands it. Is it something scalable? They grow, you grow as well. Is it something predictable, right? Because your customers, they have a budget at the end of the day. You can't tell them, hey, use it, and then at the end of the year, we'll give you something like the price of it. That doesn't work. So that price metric is the second part that, okay, I need to identify that. And you also ask your customers different scenarios that, hey, if I charge you based on this metric, does that resonate? Or what about this metric? How does that resonate as well? And you are trying to understand if it's simple, predictable, transparent, and also scalable for them. So that's the second part, understanding the price model and then also the price metric, and yeah, or the value metric we call it. The third part is about the price itself, right? Like how much are you going to charge for the solution, like your sticker price, your list price. And that is never in a vacuum. It comes down to the perceived value of you, right, your product, and the perceived value in the market. So for example, let's say Microsoft charges $10 for a particular solution, and the market also perceives their value to be 10. Now, let's say, for example, Google, their perceived value for the same solution is $8. If they charge $10, it's not going to work, right? So they should be charging $8. So measuring that gap, right? What is the perceived value of your competition? What is their perceived price? And then what is your perceived value? And then aligning your price to that. That is the work of kind of like getting that list right. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into measuring that. And you don't ask people directly, hey, what do you think? You kind of like try to triangulate it, right? You want to be a little bit like giving them like the choices of what they're making, and it's not just straightforward. And then you're able to triangulate those information together. So I would say if you're able to get all three of these, you're good. You can craft your pricing and packaging at the end of the day. And then just one thing to make sure is, when we are putting pricing strategy in place, another critical element is, it's not about always getting everything right. It's also about the strategic objective of the company. So for example, let's say Microsoft is providing high value, they can charge lower for that. In that sense, what it means is they're taking a strategy of getting the most market share. And then you can provide lower value and charge higher. That means the strategic objective of the company is maybe profitability. So again, you do all the research, you have all the insights, but then you have to align it with the strategic objective of the company at that time, and then you have your complete pricing strategy.
No, this is excellent. So the takeaway that I have understood so far is, you have these three types of, models that you just mentioned, and the point that you kept reiterating was, talk to your customers, make sure who your customers are before starting with this entire exercise. Excellent. So I think you also touched upon in the last point a very important another factor of competitor analysis. So how do you conduct competitive analysis? Like, what are your, like, is there like a specific strategy that you go through, like specific steps for the competitive analysis?
I would say there's one or two ways to do it. And one of the ways I've done it in the past is basically when somebody is buying an AI solution or a software solution, there are some value drivers, right? Like which make them buy this product. For example, if you're buying an ERP solution, what are the things that make you consider this particular company's ERP solution? Maybe it's based on customer service, maybe it's based on efficiency, less downtime, and all of those, right? So you want to understand what are the most important value drivers for a customer to make that purchasing decision. Then the second part is, okay, now you want to understand how you are doing on those particular value drivers, right? And then you also want to understand how your competitor is doing on those value drivers. So for example, maybe customer service is very important to the customer. And then you are okay, you're mediocre at that, but then you see your competitor is very good at that, right? So you're able to understand in different, like from the critical part value drivers, like what drives customer and where you're losing or winning based on the competition. And then from that you're able to also get the perceived value of a competitor, right? So when you take all of these numbers together, you're kind of like be able to triangulate and say that, okay, this competitor, their the perceived value out of 10 is 8, my perceived value out of 10 is 7. And then if your perceived value is lower, you should also be charging lower, right? I mean, theoretically, in sense, right? And then you have a price out there, right, in the market. So for example, you can have Nike and Adidas out there, right? Both of them. Who's more expensive? We don't know. I think they're the same. But then when you ask customers, you'll see that people would think Adidas is more expensive. So the perceived price is higher. The value is not, it's same value. So then they should be doing something different in terms of getting more customers. So that's how we do competitor analysis, I would say.
Okay.
And then of course you do the other stuff like looking at the net promoter score, NPS score, and
Mhm.
everything. But those are
Right.
more like routine.
Right. So here another, like a sub question, because there are a lot of like new applied products coming, which has never been seen in the market before. So if you're a startup or a small company who is doing it for the first time and you don't have a competitor as such in the space, how should we proceed at that point?
Very good question. I would say you need to identify substitutes, right? Like, okay, maybe it's not like exactly the same, but does a job similar to that, or a company which doesn't do the exact AI job you're doing. Let's say for you're doing an AI solution which helps bots and customer services, but look at other kind of like AI solutions that have been launched in the market, how they are charging, and then how does your price align to that? So finding the right substitutes would be ideal in that sense, right? I mean, otherwise, how are you gonna compare, right?
No, absolutely. I think there are a lot of startups in like different domains, like cybersecurity, which I'm a little bit familiar about. There are a lot of products that are like 0 to 1, like in the market itself. So I think that point will resonate with them a lot. So moving on to the next topic, specifically for monetization models. Like if there is a takeaway from this podcast for the listeners, what are some effective monetization models for AI products, and how do you choose the right one based on the product's characteristics? Um,
Very good question. Choosing the right one, that's kind of like the big $1 million question. But I can talk about some monetization models and
mhm,
strategic considerations. So think about there's like two ways to go in this, right? So first is you have your existing solution. It's maybe a platform or kind of like that software when the main solution you're selling. You can use AI to enhance that particular solution itself. So, for example, AWS SageMaker, they have used AI to improve their solution and all. And then, can you get a premium price out of that solution? Because generally in software, in B2B world, something list price is 100K, you're discounting to 30% and then you're selling at 70K, you have increased the value of your product. So even without increasing the list price, you can reduce discounting and get more like monetize that. So that's one way, right? Embedding generative AI to justify premium pricing. And then the second one is obviously the more simple, I mean, the one we kind of like talked about is like, okay, I create an AI product, for example, like, okay, this is my AI solution called Gen AI, right? And then this cost, it's an add-on. So it's your main solution, and then you purchase this as a particular add-on, and then you're monetizing in that way. So when you're thinking about even monetizing that, there's three things you can do. One is initially you put out a promotional price because we don't even understand or know how people are going to use generative AI and AI in the future, right? So you want adoption to go there, and you don't want to talk about customers all the talk about price with the customer, nickel and dime them. For example, one of the biggest concerns we have right now is you give a customer a particular AI solution, and there's a certain amount of credits or usage with it, and they run out too quickly. So you don't want that to happen as well. So you do go into the promotional pricing, you adopt, like make the market adopt, and then you kind of like think about, okay, next step, how do I differentiate pricing? How do I come up with tier pricing? For example, your AI solution can become a good, better, best in the future. So I would say those are the approaches. So first, you improve your original thing, and you kind of like the incremental value increases of your original solution, or you create an add-on. You go into the market with the mindset that I want to learn more about how my customers are going to use it, right? And I'm monetizing on the side. I'm not like giving it away for free, but with time, I will be able to be more, I would say, detailed and not leave money on the table and create like more tiered approaches with my AI solution. So that's how I would say the thought process should be. And if you're coming out with like just an AI solution, then
Mhm.
that's more complicated, right? Then you have to think
Right.
about, okay, the pricing model and all of those elements and kind of like bringing that together.
No, that makes perfect sense. Coming from the data science world, I have seen situations where, there are a lot of times the products are very experimental, and then you don't know whether you have like, paying customers like who are ready to pay immediately without seeing like the value of the product. So, your points actually resonate a lot here for all those applied AI products where you start off first providing the value and then go from building the monetization
And
model.
one thing I just wanted to include, like when
Mhm.
you AI, there's a lot of like usage and computation, all of these come into place. And then you have to be able to measure those as well, and that's a very challenging part, kind of like, right, having that pricing infrastructure. There are companies out there which are like Orb and others I've seen that give you that solution, right? Like you don't build it, but you kind of like buy it and you're able to use it for your usage tracking and overages. But that's also another element that, okay, I want to do consumption based pricing, I need to do it, I need to measure kind of like how usage is going, because there's a cost element associated with that. And then how I want to monetize based on that. I need that. You need that infrastructure kind of like working in the behind or in the background.
Absolutely. That was actually my next question, and probably the most important for all the technical product managers out there, who are looking at the budgets for their teams and for their projects. The biggest cost for them or for the AI teams is the compute cost and the infrastructure cost, especially with all these large language models, where to build all your downstream applications, you have to put in the cost. So actually, that was my next question. How do you factor in the cost of the data and the model training when establishing pricing structure? This is also considering the price drastically varies for when say you train your model from scratch in your environment versus you use a model off the shelf, and you do all those prompt engineering and all the other techniques to reduce the cost. So, what are your thoughts on how a product manager here should go about?
Definitely. I mean, these are early days questions everybody has, and we're all trying to kind of like figure those out. Like, okay, what is going to be the cost at the end of the day? It's a cost that is providing enough value to my customer, so I'm able to monetize that. So I would say one thing we need to understand is when we're charging our customers, right? There's a lot happening in the background, right? Like infrastructure, compute, and everything, this and that. It still needs to be simple and transparent enough for the customer to understand if you're charging them based on cost and consumption, right? Because that usage has to kind of like resonate. Otherwise, you can't have a black box and say, "Hey, you use this amount, and I charge you 100K this month." No, that can't happen. So I would say there's three parts of it. One is you should not, you should have enough credits or like computation capability with your product that it covers most of your customers use cases, right? So they pay it for at the beginning when they're buying the solution, and then they don't have to think about it unless they have a very specific use case where they're using AI solutions or compute or throughput more than others. So that's one thing. So it will help with less sales friction, right? And it will kind of like make the customer's life easy. So second is, let's say you can't do that. I mean, or it's not that simple for you, and you want to go in a pure consumption-based kind of like model. Then you need to have a right pricing calculator, right? So when the customer is saying, "Okay, I need this is the prompt I'm going to put in, and this is going to kind of like come out of like this is what I want," it tells you that okay, you're going to use 5 tokens because of this reason, because it's complex, because it's high resolution, or this and that. And Mid Journey, I think, does a great job of it. Like when you're putting in your request, they tell you, okay, this is going to cost this amount of tokens, and something else which is more simple as tokens. So having that kind of like transparent pricing is very critical when you're doing cost plus, right? And then the third thing I would say is cost is important, but you don't want to rely too much on cost, because if you do, you can't really have high margins, because it's like, yeah, this costs 5 cents, I'm going to pay you 6 cents. You're still making 20% right margin, so that should be enough.
Right.
But that's why your focus should always be on the value, right? The jobs to be done. How am I increasing productivity at the end of the day? How is this kind of like helping the end user? Am I helping someone sell more, right? And then you're able to kind of like charge a premium based on your solution, rather than, okay, this API call is doing this, you're getting to that LLM, and this is the cost, and I'm going to charge you that. So that should be your secondary metrics, but your primary metric should always be based on the value. So you're not always talking about cost plus. So those are like the 3 steps. If I summarize, like one is kind of like give enough to customers so they can use it, don't nickel and dime. Second is uh, have a very good pricing calculator which is transparent and simple and easy for the customer to understand. And lastly is always focus on the value, make cost your secondary metrics.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for. I think that summary, I think, is going to be one of the biggest takeaways from this episode. Excellent. So I think we'll move on to customer segmentation. How does customer segmentation play a role in pricing decisions? Particularly when the needs are like so diverse, like for say for an applied LLM product, or like an AI product.
Yeah, so it goes back to the beginning, what I talked about, right? Customer understanding the segments you're targeting is the most critical element. And segments can be different things, right? It can be the, the size of like the company, or even like the kind of company, enterprise, commercial, small, medium businesses, can be based on maturity. For example, you can be a Fortune 500 company, but your technology hasn't matured. So you're not even thinking about AI today. So very different segment compared to, let's say, a mid-sized company in tech who are like high tech, and they're thinking about different things. So understanding the different segments, putting them into buckets, that's very critical, right? You don't want to mix and kind of like get a muddied message. And then based on segments, it always comes down to, okay, what are our needs and what is the willingness to pay, right? And it always, it's the same everywhere. So you do segmentation for, let's say, software and AI solutions. You do segmentation for restaurants as well. You'll see the price or an offering of something would cost something else, higher in New York City, and then it'll cost lesser in Houston, where I live. So it's basically kind of like you're understanding, okay, that there the segmentation is like a location factor, right? So you're charging a premium based on that. So yes, I would say segmentation is critical to understand how your packaging should look like, right? What is the amount of features you should be giving to your best customers, right? Like the customers who have the most need, the highest willingness to pay. Then you have your set of normal customers, let's say, not call them normal, who have a normal set of need of features and have a medium like willingness to pay. And then you have your starters, or let's say your kind of like that down market, who just want to use it. They want flexibility, they want just simple, they want to just come and go and everything. And that's why you have these kind of like price models as pay as you go, right? So somebody, they will just come in, they're not going to commit anything because they don't want to, they want the flexibility, and then they want to pay based on how much they use. Completely fine. And that's why you see a lot of companies doing PLG now, right? Product led growth, kind of like going in that direction. They have created pay as you go, self starters, all of those into that particular starter model. And then as you kind of like see the value of the product itself, you move up market, right? So you kind of like, okay, now you're in a sales led motion, you move on to the better product and maybe the best if you see so much value out of it. But yeah, segmentation is critical to understand or design your pricing and packaging overall.
Absolutely. No, that makes total sense. And segmentation and user persona, building that up, I think is one of the first tasks for any product manager. So that makes sense. So the next question is very, I think specific to the AI market. The AI market is changing so rapidly, right? Like you have a foundation model today costing X dollars, and it's going to reduce as the competition increases, and then you have more players in the market. So as a company who is using those models to build your product, how do you adjust the pricing strategies as the market changes so rapidly? And it is changing rapidly. More and more players are coming into play.
Yeah, that's true. With the LLM models and everything, there's a cost which is always changing in that side, right? So one of the assumptions you have to make is it's not going to be drastically changing, right? I mean, if something is cost today $2, it shouldn't be $20 tomorrow. It should be in the range. So that's one thing. And then you should have some wiggle room, right? I mean, of course, cost can change, and then you are able to adjust your pricing without taking a hit on your margins. That's the second thing. And then lastly, you have to be transparent with your customers, right? I mean, yes, an LLM model, we're using this particular LLM model to give you this solution, this value, and everything. But we don't own that model, and we pay for it. And of course, and we're giving you the other features and everything. But if that pricing changes there, what are you going to do? You have to change, tell them, right? And let them know and say, because of this impact, we're changing our pricing. If it is, let's say, too drastic, you're like, we're going to change our LLM model, like the gateway we're using, but it'll take time. But in the meantime, this is going to be our pricing, because nobody's going to be like taking them a hit on their margins and everything for a long
Right.
time. It can be for a short window, but not for a longer period of time. So yes,
Right.
it's dynamic, and that's why we need to be more transparent with our customers and let them know how we are charging, how it's kind of like all comes together, and what are the dependencies we like as a like the solution provider have, which might impact our pricing at the end of the day. And it's the same, right? I mean, oil price goes up, what happens? Everything
Right.
goes up, right? I mean,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, if that's the case, everything should go up.
No, that makes total sense. And yeah, if you think about it, it's not like brand new. These market conditions have happened for other domains, and then probably learn from those lessons, I guess. Excellent. The next question is, I think you touched upon this a little bit before. All these AI products can be complex for users to understand. So also the pricing strategies could be complex, and your point always, I think, says that be transparent with your pricing strategies. So how do you go about educating the market or educating your customers? The value of how do you justify the value of your product? Like, yeah.
It's not as easy, right? I mean, that's why, I mean, companies are always kind of like struggling, and especially like being transparent about pricing is not easy as well. The more matrices you use, the more cost elements that come in, it becomes so complex that even if I show it to another pricing strategist, they don't get it. So how are my customers going to understand it? So definitely that's a very valid question. How do we do education? I think education comes from you. Your customers are your best educators, right? I mean, if a customer, what's the value they're getting out of it? What's their story? And that story, that's what the real story is. I can make a solution and think that this is going to change the world, but what is happening in reality, right? I mean, that's what the value lies. So use your customers as, I would say, your biggest ambassador of like the value, and to educating your other customers at the same time. So that's one element I would say. The second thing is that when you are doing demos and everything with your customers, again, try to understand the pain points they're having at the same time, and then kind of like also understand which step is helping them in which regard. So again, going a little bit deeper, understanding the customers like real stories rather than having a marketing thing, right? Like at the end of the day, so you're able to say that, hey, we're helping you in these steps because you know the details, because you've kind of like walked through with the customer. That gives you that education. So those two things would help you like demonstrate value to the customer. And then the third element is always about, okay, competition does this, and they do it in this way, but look at us, we do it in this way, and this makes your life a little bit easier. So it's easy to compare. Otherwise, if I tell you that, hey, my car can go 80 miles per hour, yeah, that's fine. But hey, my car can go 20 miles per hour faster than others, then that's like the value which comes in. So that is again, how you message it to your customer so they can understand it rather than just giving kind of like statements. I think that's very important.
Absolutely. I think this is where product manager also being a product marketing manager or, a separate role, I think that comes excellent. Okay. So my next question is, can you share any examples of, from your experience, successful or insightful pricing experiments that you have conducted and like some lessons that you have learned, um, both positive and negative, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can go in both directions, but yeah, I like restaurants, pricing strategy, and then also like software. But yeah, I mean, I've worked with before leaving Simon Kucher in 2021. One company was a large robotic process automation company. So understanding their pricing strategy globally, right? So they were got pre-IPO. They're thinking about monetization. They're leaving money on the table. So again, it comes back to we were there to mainly test out if the pricing they have today is correct, right? It wasn't about the packaging, but more about the price matrices and the price level they have based on their competition on the market itself. Is this the right kind of like pricing strategy they have? So again, we went in market research, trying to understand globally what is the different kind of like challenges they have, the how do they compare to the competition and everything, and then is this pricing strategy transparent, predictable, scalable for the customers as well. And then the end result you see is that, I mean, the pricing strategy they have is okay, but at the same time, they're too expensive compared to the competition when you're thinking about value, right? So again, one of the recommendations we had was, hey, you have a sticker price shock for customers. They assume your value to be this, but you're charging more than a competitor, which drives more value. So that's one thing. The second element was regarding how they go to market, right? So so, for example, you can have a big solution at one go, like 100K, you have to commit and you buy that. Or you can have something which is like you start the customer off at 10K, you have price matrices which kind of like scale based on the usage. So you kind of like end up at the same thing. For them, a land and expand strategy, so you kind of like get in and then you expand the customer base, was more appropriate based on the customer responses we heard and how they want to purchase. So again, that was a recommendation we provided, which they implemented later on and have been successful. So it's kind of like those things, right? So you try to understand, is the pricing right in terms of the market, right? And how you're doing with the competitors. And then the second is, yeah, we have this price model and price metrics. Is this the right one to be more effectively monetizing. And of course, packaging, we didn't do it here, but that's always comes. So that's
Got
one.
it.
And then on the restaurant side, it's always interesting as well. It's very similar in terms. So one of the first things you do, and when you go into a restaurant pricing strategy or pricing analytics, is you look at the menu board. That is their packaging, right? And then if it takes you like 10 minutes to come up, like make your order, then that packaging is not right. So because you want it to be simple and frictionless for the customer, but at the same time, sell them as much as you can to extract the maximum willingness to pay. So when you're kind of like doing a pricing project there, you work a lot on the menu board trying to understand what is the right combination of bundles, which we do in software a lot, right, to cross sell and upsell. So creating like burgers, fries, and then also maybe drinks, right, the happy meal, what should be the construct there, what shouldn't be included, what should be killed in the menu board itself, like which is not making enough money. So you spend a lot of time doing the engineering there to create such a menu board that when a customer sees it, they will spend more money than they want to. And then it comes of like, okay, the pricing strategy is also very similar. Like McDonald's, if they're charging $10, should Chick-fil-A be charging more, right? So also understanding the value customers see in different regions and all, and then trying to, yeah, I would say, experiment with the pricing itself. So very similar, done a lot of work in that. Very interesting, I would say, the restaurant
Definitely.
space. And yeah, a lot of
The the
fun.
re- the restaurant industry, yeah, I can so relate to that. Having ending up
What's
always
your
spending
favorite
more than
fast food?
Shake Shack. Does that
Shake Shack? Okay.
yeah.
Very good,
Uh,
expensive, premium. So yeah, you see.
right,
So
see.
you eat Shake Shack. So big, it's expensive, but again, you like it, you value it more than others. I'm a big fan of Chick-fil-A, and they're
Okay,
not
okay.
expensive, but they can be. They have the opportunity to raise prices. I'll still buy
I think we should have a completely separate session on, pricing strategies
it.
for restaurants. No, absolutely. This was actually excellent. I'm actually curious, if you can share it, like what were some interesting reactions to your first example when you said, there was a sticker shock, there was a price sticker shock, and your recommendation was, you gotta bring the price down or something. I'm curious to see, and this is for those product managers who go back to their leadership and say, this is not right. So what have been some interesting reactions, and how do you like respond to them, I guess?
So it always has to be backed by insights, right? So
Right,
pricing strategy is a very data-driven analytical work. And then
right,
that's why I call it arts and science. Science is the number part, art is the story, right? Like, okay,
right,
this is where we are and this is where we want to go.
right,
So if you have we talked about sticker shock, it's not going to be on a vacuum, right? Like your market research indicates that. If you look at your existing data, deals are going at 70, 80% discounts for sure. And that's because that the list price you have is not correct and you can't sell, and that's why your salespeople have to kind of like discount it at
right,
such level. So that's your first data point which you present to the management or the leadership. And then the second is, okay, I am company B, I provide a value of 6 out of 10. My competitor provides a value 9 out of 10. The other one provides a value of 8 out of 10. These are perceived values in the market. But then when we're thinking about pricing, we all charge $9. That's not going to work. So there's a misalignment in the perceived value, perceived price. And then you see both the stories align. High discount and then lower perceived value. So yes, we do have a sticker shock. So again, I'm making it very simple, but these are the data points you need to look at and
right.
kind of like build that story when you're talking to your leadership or convincing them.
Got it. Excellent. I think this would be really useful, I think, to a lot of product managers. Great. So the next topic is about loyalty and retention. So what strategies do you employ to ensure customer loyalty? This is specifically because you have hundreds of startups and companies that are coming up building different products for kind of the same use case. You have tons of competition. So how do you what role does the pricing strategy play in terms of making sure retaining customers and customer loyalty, like?
I would say pricing strategy, the main thing is your price metrics, right? At the end of the day, customer feels that that they are paying a fair value for that solution, right? So you want to understand the return, the ROI, right? The return of investment they're getting. And that's basically when you buy something, if you're happy or not, you know it, right? At the end of the day. And that's kind of like which makes you go back, and if it's something you don't like, you try to get out of it. So that's I would say the critical part, understanding the customer sentiment. But if you think about loyalty and pricing strategy, first off, get your price metric right. That's number one, I would say. Second thing is align your kind of like perceived value and perceived price, so kind of like that alignment is there. So at the end of the day, a customer having that sense of return on investment is not negative, but it is positive. And then the third thing is, it's not a, I mean, retention, loyalty, all of this requires a lot of work in terms of customer success. You see customer success becoming such a critical function as SaaS grew, because subscription was, it's flexible. You have it today, you can cancel it tomorrow. So that means I have to put in the work to convince you that when we sold you, it wasn't good at that time. We are still good, and we're still going to help you, and we're still going to be with you all throughout the way. So I think that is very important, that customers have that kind of like ability, like a customer success, where they can kind of like help them to use the product as much and kind of like be successful as well as like the software provider is. Because a lot of users-based pricing today, if your customer is not using it, how are you going to charge them and monetize them? So it's very critical in those elements.
Absolutely. No, this makes a lot of sense. I think this is where like branding strategies all come into play. Like, how do you create that foundation of for your brand so that the customer comes back?
You want to have that community, right? I mean, at the end of
Right.
the day, so if you look at it, even my employer, Salesforce, we have this trailblazer program, and you have this big economy kind of like all circled around Salesforce and people doing
Right.
different things. So this is obviously the end result of a lot of work and a lot of marketing and branding and really good work. But if you, the same thing goes for other like solutions, if they're coming out, can you create like a ecosystem which there's different elements which are all playing a role? It could be a knowledge sharing part, the community part, then you have your customer success, and then these customers also become your ambassador, and then they're more bought into the solution, they bought into your brand, and then it's kind of like, oh, when all of these things like the flywheel is working, then
Right.
it just works itself, right? The customers go and say good things, they bring new customers, and kind of like the cycle keeps
Absolutely.
going.
Right, right. No, I think this segues nicely into our next topic, which is how do pricing strategists collaborate with, product teams, other teams. What other teams do you generally collaborate with, and how does the structure look like?
So first off, it's different from company to company, right? So like there's two, and we'll talk specifically in tech itself. So it depends on who you're reporting to. So generally, pricing strategy falls into three, I would say, functions, of mainly two. One is you're in the product org, which I think is the right place to be in. The second could be you're under the finance org, right? So you're talking about more of a profitability, different kind of pricing, and then sometimes they're under product marketing as well. So it can be under all three of the functions. I feel product is the right place to be, because
Right,
product strategy and monetization strategy, they work hand in a hand. I mean,
right,
that's kind of like the thing. So yes, from my experience, I work with product managers a lot. So let's say a product manager has a new idea, a new feature that's coming out into the market. They will come to me and say, hey, I need the monetization strategy or pricing strategy for this. Then I will tell them, hey, explain me to what the product does and everything. Sometimes they will have a very nice story, and it's like, oh yeah, we can monetize this way. Sometimes they're not able to explain me what the product is going to do, and it's very complex. And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to fly. So having that discussion, right, like the initial one, understanding, sitting with the product manager, and then product managers also have monetization ideas, right? I mean, they also know more intricacies of the product, the details, and how they feel that they should charge the customer. But at the same time, your company charges in one way. If you're doing subscription in your company, you're not going to do consumption for one particular feature. So that's like the job of us, like, okay, we get it, we align it with the long term, short term company objectives, and kind of like what is going to make more sense. So product managers, primary stakeholders. Second is go to market. You can have, like we talked a lot about packaging and all of this. how are we going to go to market? Who's going to be our target customers? How can we approach them? What's going to be the sales motion? That's when you work with go to market a lot, and kind of like the hand in hand of like how we're going to implement this. Then third is finance, obviously, because there's every company has margin targets, right? Profitability targets and everything. So you need to understand the inputs from them. Okay, how are we gonna integrate this product into our overall portfolio? What are the margin targets, and how we think about profitability during the different stages, right? The early stages of the product, mid stage, and the late stage when more people have adopted. I would say then you work with sales a lot as well, because at the same time, like you, not always you get to talk with customers, but sales are the people who are most closest to the customer and are able to capture or replicate the voice of the customer. So understanding, like you can make a solution pricing and packaging which looks like a unicorn, but at the reality you're not able to implement it. So validating with sales is very critical, and then
Right.
showing them, hey, are you going to be able to explain this to customer and sell it? If they say yes, that's it. So sales is another important one. And then, of course, you do work with product marketing and
Right.
operations a little bit, just the implementation standpoint. But I would
Right.
say, just to summarize, primary stakeholder is product managers for sure, and then it comes to go to market, finance, and sales.
Excellent. That was a very, I think, crisp takeaway from that. So the next question, probably more technical. You did touch upon this before. So because the value of the products keep changing, because the cost of the foundation models keep changing, what are the methodologies that you use for forecasting the value of the product and the price? Like, how often do you go back to the board and then sit about, how do we have a new forecasting model? What is like the framework that you use?
So generally, one of the things you have a product out in the market, right? I mean, today you're maybe the first mover, right? You have all of the TAM or total addressable market, and then suddenly in 6 months you have five competitors. It's gonna change a lot, right? So you have to keep those things into mind. And again, it comes down to like other matured markets, what is happening there, and that kind of like feeds into your forecasting a little bit as well, right? Okay, this is to this year, maybe it's like this because I'm the first one or the only one, but next year is going to be different, right? The market is going to be divided. The second thing is you don't just put out a product out in the market and say that that's it and this is going to run. You're all like, that's a product manager is for the same product is working on, yeah, how can I enhance the features, how can I increase incremental value in such way that I am able to hold the value, right? So generally, value doesn't increase if you don't do anything. If it's 10 today, it'll be 9 next year and 8 next year. So you want to hold that initial value, and that's why kind of like those features and everything's coming out. So understanding that with the product team is critical for us, right? So, hey, we have been charging $100 for this, and our discounting has been 20%. Next year, I see suddenly discounting becoming 30%, right? The average trend. What does that mean? That means that my product has lost 10% value, and that's why sales is not able to sell it. And then you go to the product team, hey, what are the new features that are coming out? And they're like, hey, we have these 3 new features, which is going to increase our value by 15%. So you'll see less discounting. So again, that back and forth, you look at what is happening in reality, right? Then you go back to product and try to understand what is going to happen in the near term or short term. And then you kind of like, okay, then you do your forecasting of, hey, my product, $100 lost value, but hey, we're having new features coming out, we'll increase the value and kind of like forecast that way.
Excellent. No, no, thank you for that. I think all the above, points make a tremendous amount of sense. I think we are coming to like the final couple questions. So the one question is, what are some common mistakes that you see uh, AI product managers do, or generally, product managers, face in terms of pricing? Like, is there like, specific uh, roadblocks that you think you can highlight for product managers to maybe avoid?
Product managers love their product too much. That's their number one problem. Which is they need to love their product because they're
Right,
passionate about it. That's why they make great products. But
right,
then it's a great product because it's going to do this, and this. Sometimes people don't care, right? I mean, you can have 10, 12, 30 features, but yes, every feature has a certain value,
right.
but maybe the market doesn't care about it. So that's the one thing I would say, that sometimes thinking that this is going to create value for your particular product without consulting with others, right? Like external people or customers, or let's say I'm neutral in a particular product, so neutral
Right.
perspective. I think that's like a common mistake, and I don't blame them. This is, I mean, that's our job to be more, I would say, neutral and kind of like give a point of view from that standpoint and keep them, like on point. So that's one. The second one would be is sometimes you see, I would say product managers see that their product is not being successful, and then the competitor product is being successful, following a particular price metric, right, or a price model. And then they'll come and say, hey, they're doing this way, why can't we do it this way, and then we would also be successful. There are a lot of kind of like nuances there. Maybe you don't have the pricing infrastructure to do it, number one. Maybe your company's objectives, strategic objectives, are different, number two. And number three could be you are charging for everything in one way. You can't charge for like one product in a different way, right? So just kind of like understanding the big picture a little bit, and which they do
Right.
when you walk them through it. But of course, I can get the frustration if a product is being successful in a particular price model. I mean, yeah, you could ask for that. So those are like the two main ones. But other than that, I really enjoy working with product managers because you need to understand, even as a pricing strategist, I need to understand the product strategy. I need to understand the vision. I need to understand how the customers interacted with it and what is the value they're getting out of it. And to understand all these four blocks in a much more detailed way, I mean, only the product managers can explain to me that, right? I mean, so I really enjoy learning about products in such
Right.
detailed way, and then helping them with the monetization. But yeah, not too many complaints about common mistakes, but it's
Excellent.
mostly, yeah, those two things.
Right. No, but this is a really important point that you touched. I think all the aspiring product managers. I think that's one thing to note about is for us the products our products are always great, but to talk to other stakeholders and make sure we get the real value of our product.
Yeah, there's a book called Monetizing Innovation. It's
Okay.
written by a partner of Simon Kucher, Madhavan. It's an amazing book for product managers to understand the monetization and how that feeds into it. So basically, even before you kind of like design a product, you should think about monetization, because otherwise you're going to build 10 features where people are willing to pay for three and not seven. So why don't you understand which are the three people are willing to pay for, and then just build those rather than building 10. So, and that book gives you a lot of details and examples about like how to think from a monetization standpoint for product managers.
Right. Thank you so much. I will put the link to that book in the summary of the podcast. Awesome. So, parting question, Shah. I think this would be a question for like every speaker on the series, I guess. What is your one favorite product that immediately comes to mind in terms of pricing strategy or in terms of how well they are going to the market? One favorite product of yours.
This is good. I mean, I have been asked this question, especially in interviews and all. And I
Okay.
always answer like the product I use most, I use LinkedIn a lot, to be honest, right? And that's a product I like. And I also like their monetization strategies because I pay a certain amount, right? Like that LinkedIn subscription fee. And I always feel that what's the value I'm getting out of it if I'm not paying and everything, but I still coming back and go and pay it. And LinkedIn has kind of like progressed, I would say, over time. So initially, the value differs, right? When I started using LinkedIn 15 years back, or no, not 15, like 10 years back, I was a student, I was looking for a job. The value for that was different for me, and I was kind of like hitting up people and talking and networking. Now, at this stage of my career, of course, I'm networking, I'm trying to link up with people, but it's also like the content generation, right? Like they've given you a platform to create your own personal brand. So I find it like really interesting that they have been able to monetize like people's journey. Like today, I don't need it for a job, but then again, yeah, it's kind of like the value is there. I'm able to, we connected based on LinkedIn as
Absolutely.
well, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that this is the value they're able to kind of like provide. And that's why I pay that $30-$40 per month. So
Right.
I'm a huge fan of how they've evolved over time. And kind of like, I'm also really interested to see how they keep on evolving, because it's a platform where people, job seekers, they get a lot of value, and that was the initial thing. But how do they kind of like transition from just the professional network and having different jobs to be done for different segments and different people, right? So yeah, LinkedIn is my one of my favorite products. I have huge respect for the monetization strategy they have as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shah. This was amazing. And a point for LinkedIn here. I will let you know later how the trend grows. But awesome. Thank you so much, Shah. This was super
I
useful.
really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We will make sure we get all the questions to you from our listeners. But thank you so much. Yeah.
Yep, happy to kind of like jump in and talking pricing. I'm a pricing nerd, but all good. But
Excellent.
thanks for setting this up. Really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Yeah. Bye bye.